Hello, this is Chris Parker with the Business Simplicity Podcast, and I had a conversation with Hugo Alves, who's the Chief Product Officer of Synthetic Users. And this is used by enterprises to um, do market research with almost an infinite number of synthetic users using Gen AI. I have experimented it with myself. And so we go through the journey, the origin story of synthetic users as a company, which is fascinating. And Hugo's, coming from psychology research and how it evolved into this quite amazing product. And then we also go into my own experience and what I got right, what I got wrong, and what I learned, and how it really shifted my own perspective about my own proposition, which I really did not expect. Going through this, it was very confronting in a very positive way. So Hugo, why would it be valuable for people to listen to this conversation?
So I think one of the biggest value that they can take is that they can understand what is the purpose of synthetic users. Get a little bit of an understanding of how it is built and why we perform the way we do and why we are different from other more general purpose tools like ChatGPT. It's so easy to think, oh, but this could be done with ChatGPT, and we go in depth and as to why those differences really matter when we're trying to get effective business results.
Welcome to the Business Simplicity Podcast, where Chris Parker explores how leaders cut through complexity to accelerate strategy, execution, and growth with calm, clarity, and confidence.
Welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Hugo Alves, who is the Chief Product Officer of Synthetic Users. He's based in Portugal, Lisbon, I think. I first came across him when he was presenting this amazing solution. I think it's amazing, on the Gen AI Circle meetups. And then Gen AI Circle is a bit curated group of about 400 people around the world that are really pushing the limit on AI, Gen AI, and synthetic users is definitely in that space. So what we're going to do today is hear a little bit of the origin story from Hugo, discover a bit who he is and what the company is all about. And then I've also actually applied synthetic users to my own company and another company, and I've got some questions, feedback, and I just want to unpack that in a really interesting way. So there's going to be kind of two parts to this. So one, let's discover what the company and solution is all about, and then go into my practical experience. So outstanding. So Hugo, thank you so much for joining. Can you maybe kick us off, like the word synthetic users? Um, I guess it's in the name, but can you unpack a little bit about, just to start it off strong, what is synthetic users and why does it exist?
Okay. I think synthetic users is one of those products that it does what it says on the tin. The name is quite explicit, but for those who might not be as familiar with this space, we create uh, synthetic people that can be used for the purposes of research. It can be user research, it can be market research. So what we create is um, person descriptions that could belong to a particular group, to whatever requirement my customers provide. They can be busy moms from Texas. It can be B2B marketing managers at large corporations. It can be even rural farmers from Botswana. And we create versions of people that could belong to those groups that can be used they can be interviewed for any purpose that you want. But typically, when you're building products when you're creating new services, you want to have an understanding of the people you're building for. And sometimes it's not that easy to find them, and we can accelerate that process. We're not a replacement for speaking with humans, but we're a complement for those situations in which you're willing to do a little bit of a trade-off between speed and accuracy, and or you just want to have a first lay of the land to be better informed when you go talk to organic people.
And who is in your mind the perfect user for this? Like, and what is the job that they're doing? So if someone's coming to synthetic users, they have a problem in mind, that they're trying to resolve. Who is that ICP, if you will, and what is the job they're doing with synthetic users?
So typically, the way we look at it, it's insights managers. So people work at large corporations that in which there are different groups working in different service areas, working with different new products in innovations, and there's a constant need for understanding a particular group of people, understanding how a particular new concept might resonate with those people to get feedback, early feedback, so you can be sure that you're not going on a path that we'll end up having to walk back from, because humans end up saying that doesn't work. So whoever is responsible for large research projects and frequent research projects, in which innovation and product creation and service design are a focus.
Yeah, and I guess because you said large corporates, but I also, when I was using it, could attribute it to like lean startup, meaning validate fast and kill
Yes.
fast. I'm sure there's incredible value for smaller organizations that are like,
Um,
hey, I've got this cool idea. It's really shit, but and let me talk to a number of users, and instead of having to go down to the local mall and beg people to look at your widget. um,
Indeed, indeed. And to be fair, that's when we started. When me and Kwame first started the product, the way we were thinking about our GTM or go-to-market strategy or whatever people like to call it, we wanted to be Canva.com for research.
cool.
And kind of the analogy was always that in the same way that my mom doesn't open Photoshop to make a birthday card for my son, she does use Canva to do that, because what it did was it kind of democratized something that was the domain of only experts and all of that. And we thought we could do the same for research. We can make research accessible for people who don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do a non-leading question. They don't know how to recruit. They don't know all the care that you need to put in research for the results to be valuable. And we can help those people. We can help UX freelancers that change customers every month and need to get up to speed with a new vertical or a new domain every month. But we can cross a couple of challenges. One is, if we're trying to sell these to people who don't recognize the value of research, there's a huge education piece that you need to do, and that is always a challenge when building new services and new products. And if you're talking about UX freelancers and all of that, it's not recurring enough, the challenge to justify a subscription-based model, which was what we were going for different reasons,
Yeah.
predictability, all of that. And then another thing happened was we were struggling to go for that, what's typically called the lower end of the market. We weren't getting as much penetration as we would like to. And then I suddenly start getting emails that I believed were phishing emails, because I was like, there's no way this company, I can't name names because this is kind of a too hot of a topic on mine for people to be able to say, yes, we use synthetic users. They use it, they're happy, but getting into a flame war on LinkedIn is not really what these people want. But I was getting emails from companies that I thought, it's impossible that I'm getting an email from one of the biggest financial firms in the world. It's impossible. This is a phishing email. And I'm talking to Kwame and saying, I'm pretty sure this is a phishing email. They're asking for a demo, but I'm not sure. Then I started digging and I was like, no, we really are getting an email from this company. And we ended up closing them as a customer after 1 year and 6 months, because that's how enterprise compliance and all of that works. But we started feeling some pull from larger firms. And larger firms, if you think about it, are a better match for us, because that point that I mentioned, they have different groups working with different in different products, in different services. So the need for research is constant. And it makes a lot more sense with the business model that we were going for. So we decided to focus for now on more of the enterprise side of businesses. We have some Fortune 500 companies. We have some Fortune 100 companies. And we decided to focus on that. We still have this aspiration to be able to help mom and pop shops. But I have this thing on my mind. I've been trying this. I've been tagging him quite frequently on Twitter. I have this on my mind that one ideal customer for us would be Shopify,
Mhm.
because Shopify helps so many people build businesses. And I think they could perform even better if they provided the service like ours to their merchants. So the person who's selling now some jewelry online and is homemade and all can understand what other types of jewelry could they sell. Maybe someone who sells dog food could figure out what other animals could also. I don't know. I think synthetic users could be an amazing partner for Shopify. Toby, if you're listening, here I am again trying to convince you. I think we could be an amazing partner for Shopify because it would allow us to do something that we wanted to do in the beginning to help small businesses understand their customers better and build better products and services, but do it immediately at a scale that will have an amazing impact.
Yeah. Um, Outstanding. And can you just give me a few words on where it came from? So, like, how did this emerge? Because I see on your LinkedIn that you've been the chief product officer there since 2023. So it's not very old, but it must have emerged from some sort of trigger or need in your life or some observation. And then here we are. So where did
So,
this come from?
this goes back a lot. So my academic background is quite different. It's not a techie background. My academic background is clinical psychology. I did a master's in clinical psychology here in Lisbon. And when I finished my master's, I started working at my university as the lab manager for 6 years. So for 6 years, I was the person responsible for managing the day-to-day operations of the psychology lab at ISPA. And essentially, my job was helping run experimental studies, helping with data analysis, figuring out new experimental paradigms. And a really, really core part of my job was managing the participant pool. The participant pool is essentially the who is available to be part of studies. And if you're familiar with academic research in cognitive science, psychology, and a lot of topics, you know that first and second year students are kind of the bread and butter of a participant pool. They go, they spend half an hour in front of a computer making some tasks, and then they get some course credit. And every semester, I ran into a big challenge, which was I would have some researcher knock on my door and say, Hugo, I need 200 participants for this study. I need 50 for this one. And I need 100 more to pre-test some materials that I want to use in 6 months. And every semester, I would end up with a balance sheet in terms of participants that didn't fit. I was always lacking participants. And this challenge of finding people for us to be able to understand and to be able to make sense of what is the human condition and how do humans work, what do they feel, what do they think, what do they reason about, is something that I kind of chased me throughout my life. Because when I finished, when I was working there, I decided this was early days of mobile. Mobile was finally taking off. So people were starting to have smartphones and tablets. It started to become something quite normal. And I thought people have kind of moments in their lives which when they're bored, they don't have anything to do. Why don't I build a business, a service in which researchers can publish their studies to an app and people can be waiting for in the doctor's office and they can be helping science and making money at the same time. So I left my job at my university to build this. But I didn't have a developer. I wasn't a developer, so I joined my co-founder's agency had a design and development and innovation agency at the time. I joined his agency with the idea of stealing a developer. I'm going to join as a social media manager, and while I'm there, I'm going to convince one of the developers that this is the best idea in the world, and we're going to build this together. Truth is that I wasn't able to convince a developer to join me. Developers are pitched ideas all the time. and they're quite picky, correctly so, in what they decide to pursue. But what ended up happening was that I became a product manager, and I've been a product manager for the last 11 or 12 years in a lot of different domains, B2C, B2B, really early stage companies, more on the growth side, some AI stuff there too. And one of the challenges that as a product manager you keep running into is, how important it is to do research. You know how central to building great products and great services is to having understanding whoever you're building for. And you also know that it's not as easy as it should be, that sometimes you're building products for people who are really hard to reach, either because they have some rare disease or because they're the CEO of companies. And CEOs don't just stop and spend half an hour talking with you about the challenges they face with CRMs. It's not it. So there's challenges in terms of recruiting. Who hasn't been in a session that simply the participant doesn't show up? It's expensive. It takes a lot of time. The analysis, the all takes. It has too much friction. And when me and Kwame decided to start building with large language models, this was mid 22, before ChatGPT. Me and Kwame, we met 11 years ago when I was trying to poach one of his developers, but we stayed friends and we worked together in a couple of different things before Step Users. And in 2022, I'm sending him messages. Hey, have you seen this with GPT-3 at the time? Showing him what was now possible. And one day he turns to me and says, hey, come by the office on Monday. And on Monday, I was in the office and I was like, let's figure out. This is a fundamental revolution in terms of capabilities. Let's figure out how can we apply this new stack to help people build better services and better products. But at the time, we weren't sure of how to do that. So we did a lot of different Miro prototypes. So we decided, like, okay, so Miro is one of those tools that almost everyone uses in product, be it the UX researchers, be it the designers, be it the PMs, be it the engineers. So let's build some tools on top of Miro to help. And we built a concept map explorer. You would put a concept in the center, click a button, it would create a mind map. Now, this is kind of common, but I think we were the first to do this. We built a planet-centric canvas assistant. So planet-centric canvas is essentially a way for you to be more aware of second-order impacts of the products that you build. So instead of just mapping the user, you map the communities in which the user is involved, or the communities that are involved in the sourcing of the materials of whatever you want to build. So it helps teams be more aware of the global impact that their products might have. We build a business model canvas assistant. So you would just give it your idea of your business and it would fill all the sections of the business model canvas. And then we built a persona canvas. And we ended up pitching all of these tools to one big VC firm. And I remember being in the call with them and showing all the tools and then being asked, so which one are you doing? And I was like, which one? No, I'm doing all of them. It's kind of a product suite. This is going to help people with different needs. And they said, okay. And then I left the call and I was like, they're right. They're right. They're absolutely right. I can't be building all of this. And I
now in the call that I seem to remember on the Gen AI circle, did they like confront you with that and they say, Hugo, you got to decide?
Yes.
Or did you figure that out afterwards on your own?
They didn't tell me I needed to pick. They implied that they were expecting me to pick one of them.
There's some wisdom there, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course. I'm glad they did. So me and Kwame, after the call, I turned to Kwame like, we need to go do some user research. We need to go talk to some PMs and some UX designers, and we need to do some user research. And we're like, oh my God, it's going to take so long. And suddenly I take the persona canvas that I had built and I create product designer. I ask him, hey, what are the main challenges you face? And suddenly he replies with, oh, it's hard to balance aesthetics with functionality. It's hard to recruit people to understand what they need. And I'm like, wow, we have something here. We have a people simulator. This is going to be our thing. First of all, we don't want to go for the,
Mm.
oh, we're going to summarize user interviews. There are going to be hundreds of those companies. There's going to be people better positioned than us. Let's go for this outrageous idea of creating people. This is going to be, I'm pretty sure that everyone's going to love us. We were quite aware of how polarizing our product could be. So we decided to focus exclusively on that. And funny enough, it was called not synthetic users, it was called synths with a Z at the end, because I'm really bad at naming. And 2 days before we launch, our product designer says, "Oh, I was talking to my boyfriend yesterday, and he was like, I don't know how to pronounce your name, and it's kind of weird to pronounce." And I just said, I don't care. We're going to be launching in 2 days anyway. Let's just call it synthetic users for now, and then we decide. What I wasn't aware at the time was that this name would end up being kind of the de facto category name for this kind of product. And we've been quite lucky with having this name, because people just search for, they hear about synthetic users, they search for it and end up
Great.
On our website.
Yeah, it's nice, the Kleenex of
Yeah.
synthetic users, so to speak. So before I fascinating, I love these origin stories, because it's evolved. And
Mhm.
Someone I research and I've written a book about is Rumi, the Persian, mystic and philosopher and poet. And one of his statements was, you will discover the way as you're walking on the way. Rough paraphrase, and it sounds like you've just been, with curiosity and intention, just walking, and then also being not too married to your darling. So it sounds like you had to kill a lot of darlings along the way. Before I share a little bit about my experience with synthetic users and figure out from you what I did right and not right, what is the tech stack? Because this is LLM enabled, so you couldn't have done this really 5 years ago.
No.
So without revealing any secret sauce, what is powering these synthetic users?
So large language models. Now we're supporting vision, so it's not just they're multimodal models right now too, but essentially large language models. What we understood was and that's the reason why we have this prompt engineering description, is that these models are extremely capable, but you need to understand them really well to know what are their shortcomings, what are their biases, what are their tendencies. You need to understand even the training process to understand why these models behave in the ways they behave. And each of them has a slightly different flavor. So what we do is, I always tell this to investors, is that I'm building Legos. Someone else is building the Lego pieces, and I'm the one who's assembling them in a way to create something novel. So we don't train our own models. It's it's something that is extremely expensive, and one lesson that has come throughout these 3 years of building with AI is that even when you just fine tune a model, which is something easy, cheaper, all of that, you've spent some effort. It's not expensive, but you need to put a lot of effort into fine tuning, creating a good data set to fine tune a model, and then 2 months after, a new state of the art model comes that just beats your fine tuned model by a lot. So it's in my perspective, it's not worth to invest a lot right now in fine tuning, because the big labs are doing what they do, competing, and the prices are going down. So I'm just privileged to be able to use the models that exist out there. So essentially, we use large language models. We have a complex infrastructure because exactly because of the limitations of the models. Sometimes you can't ask the model to do everything at once. You need to have multi-steps, or you have some kind of agent on the background that is managing stuff for you. And we use maybe, I would say right now we are using maybe 7 or 8 different models at different stages of the
Mm,
process in our platform, because in some cases speed
yeah.
is extremely important. At that stage, in that step, I need a really fast model, so I'm willing to trade off a little bit of the quality for the speed. In some other cases, it's like I don't care, it could take 10 minutes, but I want the best model there is right here. I want it to reason, I want it to do all of that. So it's a mix of models with then a lot of infrastructure on top of it to coordinate and to kind of crystallize workflows and data streams that we feel can build the best
Yeah.
models.
No, well, I think let me take over and let me explain what I did with the platform. And I'm really curious, and I think I have some learnings already through that experience. Um, and it maybe goes back to your investor thing around focus, because I think some of my research might have been not focused enough. But
Mhm.
I've done 5 research projects. I was able to get up and running by watching like a 9-minute how-to video. It's right on the portal. There's a video. Um, um, Someone, yeah, I guess he said it would be 30 seconds, but he immediately said this won't be 30 seconds. But it's like 10 minutes. And once you understand the basic gist of it, okay, now so basically it's that simple. Okay. After watching a 10-minute video, I can understand how roughly things are happening in the portal. And what I decided to do for the first projects is for my own company, Boolean Business Design, I have 3 propositions. There's strategy acceleration, execution acceleration, growth acceleration, as in personal growth and coaching. And I have 3 rough personas for that. Strategy is more leadership, execution is more
Mhm.
program, get stuff done. And then coaching can be, people that are more vibing with me, that call me to say, hey, help me out on this challenge or whatever. And I ran 3 projects, um, tying those things together. So persona 1 to offer 1, kind of linearly like that. Fortunately, in the last couple of months, I've documented my company pretty extensively using my simple
Mhm.
business design framework. And so I had a real nice wealth of knowledge. And what I use that business design document for is in GPT. I call it my mission bot. And so that helps me,
Cool.
like, if I ever need to write something from the context of my business, or ask questions, I have that in the GPT project, as well as some other artifacts. And so it's always context aware, exactly what my
Mhm.
my business is all about. So I had basically everything at my fingertips, and I was able to just go fast. um, the fourth one is I'm involved in a leadership development network, and we're getting together in Switzerland in 2 weeks, and it's about positioning and sales. So I was like, well, let me see if I can discover anything from that. Their proposition and persona were less clear. So I had to
Mhm.
gather some other artifacts and did some pre-work in GPT in order to prepare it. So I could figure out, okay, what is the proposition? What is the customer? And then what's the question as well? I think refining the question is really, really important.
Okay.
And then, um, and honestly, after doing those 4 experiments, what I also did, because you can actually, it's amazing to like actually see the answers of these humans. It's, they're bot humans, but they're talking like, oh yeah, like last Thursday out over lunch with my wife, I, reflected on this, and
Mhm.
it was like really, it's really human interaction in a really, really fascinating way. And then then it generates an overall report. There's some sort of mind map that I was never able to get to work in any of them. So, but anyways,
I
so
was I was just chatting with the
yeah,
rest of the team because I broke the knowledge graph, the mind map,
yeah.
and I need to fix it. I was like, I
Well,
need it's my task for the day.
well, I noticed that wasn't. But anyways, the overall summary report is really revealing, and then you could also download the entire, research set in multiple
Mhm.
formats. Um, and as an experiment, I dropped the research set into Notebook LM and had it generate a podcast for me, because I was like, okay, well, what is the essence of this? And I did that for the Leadership Development Network, and it was incredible. It was even though the um, um, say the proposition and persona weren't totally bang on. I think it was really affirming of a lot of the assumptions we had. And then that got me suspicious. I was like, wait a second,
Okay.
wait a
Because I
second.
don't like affirming.
Yeah,
Exactly.
wait a second. Is this just, GPT wanting to please me, and just like, oh, Chris, you're the greatest thing ever, like, no, you little, lying bastard machine. And so what I did is I advise this to my clients sometimes when I do customer experience work. I use GPT to spin up the most aggressively horrible anti-persona I possibly could. Just everything that I don't want, everything that is just not who I want to work for. And then that was the fifth experiment I ran. And I said, okay, let me do the same essential questions of my first three, but asking this anti-persona, how would he love or she love to buy from me? And fortunately, at the end of it, like, no, they're just not interesting. Some quotes: "I'd be cautious about buying from this company right now. While the solution addresses some of the key challenges, like alignment and execution delays, there are too many unknowns: unclear ROI, vague implementation, no guarantee." And I was like, okay, all right. It was confronting to read it honestly. The next one, honestly, I'd be cautious about buying from this company right now. Good in theory, but I want use cases, I want proof, I want demonstrated tangible ROI. I asked it to be the most hard ass A-type personality, what is it, ENTJ, fact driven, not empathetic, everything that I am not. And fortunately,
there was not a fit.
There was not a fit. But what I discovered through that process was these are valid criticisms of my positioning and my proposition. So I was like, okay, well, I do want to repel these people, but this is real valid feedback about gaps in my messaging and gaps in my positioning. And so it was really educational. Now, my learning from this, and then I'll hand it over to you to maybe fill in some of the blanks, is knowing up front, and this is where, because I'm not a research professional, maybe I got it too wrong. I probably went too broad. Knowing up front, what is the hypothesis that you want the actionable answer to? I think would have made this more valuable, because this has been an amazing, valuable experience, but maybe having a tighter line on, this is the experiment I'm running. And I'm sure proper research analysts have frameworks for that. So it was but this is the journey that I went through, and I'll just throw it back to you. And I'm just curious, what did I do right? And what did I just completely miss in this whole process?
I don't think you completely missed anything. I think in general you use the tool as we have kind of the expectation. There's a really important aspect here, which is it's just a tool.
Yeah.
It's just a tool. Any tool that we interact with has a learning curve, has let me figure out how to best use this. Some of them, the learning curve is really shallow. It's like, in 5 minutes, I'm an expert. In some of them, the learning curve is really hard. If you talk about people who use Salesforce, they're going to tell you it's a juggernaut. It's a juggernaut, and it's not easy to use, because the use cases for which it is used, they're complex ones, and there's a lot of challenges. So there's huge variability in tools, and tools involve a learning process of how to best interact with them. And I know you didn't have a lot of time, because I sent you the link to sign up quite recently. But that's it. It's the same with everything. A designer, when Figma first came out, there was already Sketch as kind of the anchor to that kind of interaction. But Figma was a new one. It has different names, it has different flows and ways of building it, and it was Sketch was even more different from Photoshop. So when Sketch first came out, it was quite different from Photoshop, which was a lot of what was used for this. So people need to get used to the tool. It's just that. So I'm pretty sure that if you keep using synthetic users, you will get better at, I know I can't be too generic. So I don't know how you gave the input. Just give a little bit context for people who are listening to us. the most basic kind of study, the simplest kind of study we have in our platform is one that we call research goal. Essentially, it just takes two inputs. Takes an audience. You describe the audience, or you give us what would be your recruitment criteria, and the research goal. So what do you want to learn about? So who and what do you want to learn about? And I'm not sure how you went about it, but we have that conversational interface when you
Yep.
first enter this. And the reason why we built the conversational interface was particularly early on when we were still free and anyone could drop by and run some research. What happened a lot was that on the audience, people would sign up to experiment would just say people. And if you've run research and if you've run anything, you know that people is not a group to be studied. It is in psychology, we are trying to understand people in general, but we know that for purposes of user or market research, there's no such thing as people, because people involve an old person in rural China that lives just from what they cultivate, and it involves the highest paid CEO, Jeff Bezos. So people is too much of a diverse group. And that conversational interface that we have there is there exactly to make sure it asks probing questions. You say people and said, oh, okay, but what type of people?
Well,
What age?
yeah, what I discovered was indeed it was probing, and it was conversational. It wasn't just two inputs. It says, okay, who's the persona, and I gave it my definition of a persona description, and then it asked clarifying questions, and then it says, okay, what's your goal? I said, well, what do they think of this proposition? And then
Mhm.
it asked refining questions there, and then at some point I said, just go for it, and then
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and then yeah,
But
it kept
that's
asking
it.
discovery
Exactly.
questions. Yeah,
It does exactly because of that, because we know how important, everyone knows this in conventional research and synthetic research, the same. The inputs make a lot of difference in terms of the outputs. So if your research question is a crisp one, something that is already kind of purpose with the context that you need, all of that, your results are going to be better. The
yeah.
same with synthetic users. It's just the same. The big advantage, and this is I think people sometimes forget how big this is. The big advantage of a product like mine is you can learn my product by spending an afternoon, because you run a study and you're like, a little bit too generic. Okay, let me run another one without going through the recruitment process, without anything. I can generate anyone I want in 5 minutes, and let's iterate. Let's run another. Oh, this one is a little bit better. Or you feel it's a little bit too positive, and you look and you're like, oh, my research goal was kind of a leading was written in a leading way. So let me just rephrase it to say that I'm working with some company and I want this to be destroyed. And then the interviewer that we generate is going to be a lot more aggressive in the
Yeah.
questions that he asks. So the ability to quickly iterate on both the audience, we might generate the first one and say, oh, I forgot to say that I only want people from Germany right now because we're focused on the German market. And it gave me people from all across Europe. You can do a new study in 5 minutes. So the ability to iterate and to make studies not let's do a study and let's spend 2 weeks
No, yeah.
recruiting and doing all of that, to, hey, I just ran one and let me
I think
run another one.
yeah, I think I did 3 sessions, because indeed after I did the first three on myself and then gave it a night, and after reading it, and that was probably 2 hours of work maybe, and then all this other stuff starts sparking, and you're like, okay, well, okay, well, let me do it from another perspective, and then let me go out and get that, enablers network thing, and brought that in, and then reading that, and then that's when I got this is very affirmative. I
Yeah,
want to I want to come at it a different way, but it took hours, not days.
yeah. Like the affirmative. So the affirmative is a common criticism, because people are used to interact with products like ChatGPT, which recently had one big challenge with sycophancy, but the sycophancy issue is an issue since day one with large language models. By the way they are trained, they are pleasing engines. They want to please whoever they're interacting with. And that's why a specialized product like mine comes in. Because if you go to ChatGPT and you say, can you can you generate some personas that could be mashed potato lovers? And it gives you five personas to say, oh, okay, now pretend you're one of them and give me feedback on a really terrible idea. And they're going to say, oh, I love that idea. Because ChatGPT, by the way the system prompt is designed, by all of the training process that goes there, tends to be that pleasing companion to a fault, to a huge fault. And people are now kind of pushing back because people want to be challenged. Of course, we get comfort from being confirmed, but we know that for us to be successful and to be uh, good people in the world, we need to be challenged by our family, by our friends, by our colleagues. So we know the importance of it. So if you use ChatGPT, you're going to get that kind of result. That's one of the things that our product, I think, does best, but it still sometimes goes, as you saw, into more the affirmative side, is to be more challenging because if you create a mashed potato lover on synthetic users and then you promote some kind of stupid idea to him, he's going to say, no, I don't like that idea. That idea is worthless, or I don't see why you're even spending time doing that. So we are not the sycophancy engine that ChatGPT is, although it's something that we need constantly through our evaluation process to be evaluating to know exactly which models have more of this tendency, which models need more of a prompt towards a different direction.
No, um, when I was setting up the research, and I don't know the right answers, you have to pick the number of people, synthetic people.
Yes,
And I
yes.
think I picked 8 or 5. I don't know, but it. So a couple of questions on that. What's the sweet spot of number of respondents? And is there like this library of respondents out there, or does it really
No,
spin up?
no, it spins up. It would
Uh,
be impossible for me to predict
yeah,
the respondents that my customers would ask me to generate. So there's no pre-built. It's
yeah.
all on the fly. I think that's one of the powers. How many interviews should I run on each study? It's my failure as a product person to have been asked that question so many times. It's my failure. I don't know how to sort this out. I always go back to it's a tool. It's a matter of you experimenting, but we don't allow. For example, we just increased the maximum amount of interviews per study to 20. Before it was only 10. Why did we only have 10? Because in the same you have the same concept with organic research, which is saturation. Saturation means that you're running a new interview and no new topics are surfacing. You've explored in the previous interviews, you've explored what was there to be explored, and you're not getting anything new. So at that time, it's not worth running any more research, at least with the same script, with the same research guide, with the same goal. You might narrow, you might drift, you might go to some other adjacent topic, but with the same one, it's not worth. And what we discovered early on is one thing that you're going to notice in our interviews in comparison to organic ones is that the answers that synthetic users give are richer, are more in depth than humans. And in the early days, there were two things that in the early days we had to kind of decide was, do we want to make the so there's two important aspects in any answer. One is the content, which is kind of what topics are mentioned, what challenges, what pains, what goals. So is the semantic content of the answer the same that you would get from a human interview? And the other one is the form. And when you run user interviews, people you go through the transcripts and they're hard to read because when people are speaking, they go on detours, they stop mid sentence. It's not fluent. And early on, we had to make a decision. We want to make this as human as possible, so both content and form. And it's harder for my customers because they're going to have what it's going to be less. It's not going to be that easy to read an interview, and we need to run longer interviews to extract everything. Or do we want just to focus on the content
Mm.
and not the form? And we
Well,
decided just for that.
my feeling is 8 was more than enough for me. Maybe too many. Maybe 5 would have been enough. But then, but it's amazing how human it is. And so one of the personas on my anti study was Marcus Chen, and then there's this sort of openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, which was
Those are
quite
those
tight.
are that's called the Big Five or
Yeah.
the Ocean Model. It's the most well validated psychology model. Myers-Briggs tends to be the one that people talk about more, but this is the most scientific one.
And I think also I hear about this big five more in marketing and research, and indeed. And his name's Marcus Chen. He's 44, from New York. He's a CEO. He's decision making style data driven, leadership approach command and control, risk tolerance moderate, work life balance work focused, communication preferences direct and concise. So not somebody I would hang out with, a lot, but the first question is, what are the most pressing challenges you're currently facing? So that, and I didn't ask that question, the platform asked that, because I think it was kind of an orientation question. And indeed, you can get to know this person and actually also sympathize with this person. Like, well, maybe Marcus wouldn't be so bad, because it's like one of the biggest challenges I'm dealing with right now is driven by the inconsistency I see across departments when it comes to executing on key initiatives. Okay, targets are often clear. We put the metrics on paper, align with them, with broader organizational goals, laid out the plan, but somewhere in the middle, there's a disconnect. And honestly, that's my sweet spot. That's why I call it strategy acceleration. I'm not going to make strategy for Marcus, but I could help Marcus land the strategy with the humans. And it's, so I'm like, wow, Marcus, okay, I can get you. And then, and then couple paragraphs down, the common thread here is I'm running up against resistance, misalignment, operational friction that's draining momentum. And for someone like me who thrives on speed, performance, and results, becomes not an organizational issue, but a personal frustration too. It's like, well, this is all catnip for me. Like, wait, these tensions are super relevant, and that's all stuff, so I expected to hate these people, but actually going through this, I was like, yeah, there's value over there. It was really, really fascinating and deeply human, and it inspired an empathy from within me through reading through these things. So
I I think a product like ours can be we joke around, we're they're empathy engines. So there's the the products that allow you to build empathy. You know, the I walk on someone's shoes. You don't walk on someone's shoes, but you understand them and you understand their motivations and their needs a lot better after reading an interview than not at all. I've seen people saying, "Oh no, synthetic use is so bad that it's better not to do any research at all." And I there's a joke now on LinkedIn. I normally go there and say, "Have you tried it?" Because that can only come from someone who didn't experience the product. Because the product is a it's something that allows you to understand how someone else looks at the world in a quite empathic way. Although we tend to think of, oh no, but it's our algorithms and it's just this, it's math, it's not empathic. What we discovered with AI is that math can be quite empathic, which is kind of weird, even for me who works on this.
No, it's incredible. And I guess for me, the value is now I also have this artifact, meaning I have these full research studies that in the
Did
future.
you
Yeah.
did you ask follow-up questions? So we have
Yep.
this ability on any
Yeah.
interview to ask follow-up questions.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, and in preparation for this, I went back this morning and I asked, and you can tag this little ask to all users or not. I asked a lot of follow-up questions, and I tried to keep them consistent, because it seems like the system generates the first 10 questions or so, or
Yes,
amount of
yes.
questions that gives you an orientation. And I'm like, well, I want more sharp. And the last one was, would you buy from this company? Why or why not? Be as brief as possible. And this is where I'd like to see proven track record first. And maybe that's because I didn't feed it a track record, because I have case studies and credibility, but this is what this persona is looking for, is proof, so that, like, okay, yeah. And for me, the shift has been, I believe there's some real potential value that I can bring to the Marcus Chens of the world, as opposed to only working people that I'm more sympathetic with. And I think my own messaging and positioning can be shifted on that. And for me, this was, it's only through this empathy, this reading through this is like, wow, really interesting. Now, what do people do? Like, okay, so I guess it comes back to the goal of the research. And I guess if you're a
Mhm.
professional researcher, you have that goal and you know you're going to get some outcome and you're going to make a yes no decision or something like that. Is that the typical where the value really comes from this? So it's like if someone's going to be using synthetic users to do some research, the value comes from a decision they take after they've done the research, right? Or
Mm,
is it more?
I think right now most people use us not as a replacement of conventional organic research, but as a complement in several different stages. So one is just knowing the language. So let me give you a more concrete example. Imagine you're talking about building a new product for let's say collectors of stamps. I'm gonna go with a kind of weird one. And you feel that, hey, I collect cards. I've built a business around collecting cards, but maybe I could extend my business to people who collect stamps. And let me see how this could be played out. So instead of going immediately and trying to go to forums and try to find stamp collectors, you generate a couple of stamp collectors on synthetic users, and you generate some interviews to understand what their challenges are, what they would need help with. And from the moment you read the interviews, you understand that they have their specific language to talk about stamps, to talk about businesses, to talk about why they do it. And then when you go talk to a person out there in the world who's really a stamp collector, you're the ability of you to be able to build rapport with that person just went through the roof because you already know the differences between this kind of stamps and this kind of stamps because you already know that one of the big pains is having a hard time keeping them in a pristine condition. So you've already built that muscle that now you can do an organic interview and take 10 times the value that you
Yeah.
would take if you were directly there. So this is one of the things, which is kind of as a preparation for for going talking to a human. One thing that I see a lot happen in my product is that we are used to narrow down options. So you're a big company, you're doing an innovation workshop because you want to build a product for a particular demand space, and you have at the end of the workshop or mid workshop, you have 12 concepts that could play out. You either go and run interviews with people for each of those concepts to get feedback and decide on which ones to narrow down, or you use synthetic users to get those 12 to 4 or 5, and then you go and use those 4 or 5 and go talk to humans to validate that. And the cool thing about this one is that you can then look at what synthetic user said and what human said. And what typically happens with this is that people come back to me and say, "Oh, Hugo, it just boosted my confidence in your product so much because we ended up
Hmm.
going talking to humans, and humans are talking about one concept, and I'm having a deja vu because that's what your product said about that concept." And I'm like, yes.
There you go. Yeah.
So that's this is one of the things that I say to people. And you saw we were talking before we started recording about the post that I did on LinkedIn, essentially telling people, hey, if you have an audience and a research goal and you want me to run a study for you,
Yeah.
I'll do it. And one thing that I do to people while I'm demoing is they ask me, "Oh, okay, but how do I know this works?" And I tell them, "Hey, we have some case study. There's academic research. I could bombard you with academic research in which people who have zero interest in my product, they don't have anything to do with me. They are testing this idea of large language models being able to reproduce
Yeah.
completely different aspects of human nature. So I can kind of bombard you with that. But what I always tell people to do is, you've probably run some research recently, something that is not kind of obvious. So what you should do is you should come to synthetic users, share, of course, zero of the outcomes of the research, but share the inputs, share what was how did you recruit people and what did you want to learn, and run interviews. And then you by yourself without me knowing what research you had run or what did my product say. You can judge by yourself because there's nothing like seeing the product work.
Yeah.
This is something that we discovered is that if we can get people to this stage of running a comparison study of their research with what we provide, we're going to have a client. We're going to have a customer.
So is in the spirit of sadly wrapping up because I'm thoroughly enjoying this, but is this the call to action, if you will? And so if you are a research analyst and you're doing some research and you're triggered by this potential, and to reach out to you on LinkedIn and run this kind of sort of blind study. So take something you've already done, maybe in a traditional way, and bring in the inputs, not the outputs, and then compare and contrast. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's it. That's for me. That's the ideal situation. Is come to me. You're going to spend zero. I'm going to do it for free. Come to me. Send me a message and say, Hugo, can you run this? I just need recruitment criteria. How did you find the people you interviewed, and what were either your questions, your goal, whatever it is, and I'll just use the inputs of your research and I'll give you the output of my platform, and then it's up to you to check and compare.
Incredible. Well, I found it amazing and fascinating, and also in a SaaS Gen AI product space, to see how you clearly have linked together different engines at different steps of the way, to craft people, to prompt them through setting up the research, and then of course executing the research, and generating the output. Outstanding. And again, for me, it confronted me about some of my biases, some of my assumptions. So it definitely did the job for me. So and
we're just humans.
We're just humans, and we're benefiting from these giant mirrors, these things, these LLMs that are able to reflect back. And I believe if you stay curious and cautious sometimes, because GPT wants to please you, so be careful. Don't make life decisions based on GPT advice, please. But this does it at a scale. So if you're validating, if you're I think if you're making a major decision on a company product launch, something to validate, there's really no reason not to do this. Just to say, hey, am I on the right track? What am I missing? How do if this is what I feel this persona group would really appreciate, am I right? Because we oftentimes are so in love with our product that we're just blind to the irrelevance or whatever. So, some sort of fly in the ointment that could screw it all up.
Yeah. I think when we first launched, we didn't. So what you experience now, it's what we call a dynamic interview. So we generate a synthetic user on the one side, and then we generate some kind of an interviewer that will decide on what questions to ask interactively. In the beginning, that was not the case. In the beginning, that it was we generate the synthetic user, but the questions were fixed questions for all the two types of interviews we did. And one of the interview types was concept testing. And at that time, 4 of the 8 questions were negative questions. Were what concerns do you have about this idea or this concept? What problems do you see in the implementation or the consumption of the product? What ways do you see this product being improved? So my questions were disconfirming questions. I didn't want my product to be a yes. I think dog food that your baby can also eat is an amazing idea. No. I wanted my product to provide.
You have something.
No.
The dog works the other way, though. The dog will eat the baby food.
But, exactly. So I wanted the product to provide, to not be a yes man. That is not helpful. That we know that and that's the concern with people using ChatGPT for this, is that ChatGPT is too much of a yes man. To be useful in most cases.
Outstanding. Hugo Alves is coming to us from Portugal, from Lisbon, and you can find him at syntheticusers.com. I'll put the link in the show notes. I'll also put the LinkedIn there. So if you are running research and if you're triggered and inspired by this, I really urge you to reach out to Hugo on LinkedIn and run that test. If you happen to do it, then also let me know, or this will be posted on LinkedIn. I'd love it if you go back there and then let us know what happened with that experiment. I would be just excited to hear that. So Hugo, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Someone who really values how to build great businesses, how to build effective businesses, and someone who's curious about this new world of having artificial intelligence helping us help other people.
Curious every day. Thank you, Hugo.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Business Simplicity Podcast. If this conversation resonated, please share it with a fellow leader navigating complexity. Visit ebullient.com to discover how we can partner to simplify your strategy, align your teams, and accelerate meaningful growth.